Consciousness, This Unknown by Didier Buffet. On this All Saints' Day, I find it interesting to reflect on the reality of consciousness and the representation we have of death. We have eliminated spirituality from our lives. It's a shame. We live in a world that calls itself Cartesian, where science has become a religion. I remind you that science is not synonymous with truth, but with proof. Science tells us what is true at any given moment. However, science never provides answers to metaphysical questions such as the question of death or love. I am not far from sharing the idea that death is a change of state and that it is not nothingness. Of course, one could argue that this is a very natural way of finding a form of soteriology. I was able to see by talking to my father, who had Lewy body disease, that this did not take away anything from his view of me. I saw that there was an unbreakable bond of love. I think we need to differentiate between certain forms of diseases like Alzheimer's and Lewy body disease. I also believe that this state of consciousness also requires energy, and that without this vital energy, this state of consciousness can be extinguished in any case in this life here on Earth. I am convinced that love is a very special energy. It is not simply a feeling, but it is an extra-temporal fluid which is not accessible to everyone in its true perception. There are certain humans who have slightly finer antennae and who are capable of hearing this song of the cosmos. It is the old notion of the veil in philosophy. Some only see the veil, others see beyond of the veil. I wouldn't call it intelligence, but rather a form of sensitivity. We are increasingly seeing forms of autism emerge that affect children who have a sensitivity slider that is a little more sensitive and different from others. This is also what we call neurodiversity. In terms of neurology, we are still at the very beginning of understanding how the brain works. As Françoise Hardy said so well in My Friend the Rose, "Believe he who can believe, but I need hope." The world we live in is getting darker and darker, as if the problems were piling up and the solutions were getting smaller. I think it is time, as André Malraux once said, to move towards a century that is a little more spiritual and a little less materialistic. This is also what Jacques Attali says in his latest book. We haven't made much progress in terms of humanism. Every time we discovered progress, we tried to twist it into a threat. What original sin tells us in the Bible is that by gaining knowledge of good and evil and freedom, man hybridized good with evil. Thus, good is now consubstantial with evil. Purity is no longer accessible here on earth. We have lost innocence. And this lack of purity irremediably condemns us to our own destruction. It would take a miracle for all humans on this earth to realize that we have a common project, that of surviving by trying to be a little more fraternal, and therefore by being a little more united. We are terribly lacking in compassion. We live like cancer cells in indifference and contempt for the rules of life. But once again, I am pessimistic because the Bible begins with fratricide. Ferocity is the condition of man. This war in the Middle East on this sacred land of the biblical writings and the life of Jesus is a desperate sign of this fratricide. As if the Shoah had not been enough to completely despair of humanity. Today, even the descendants of the martyrs must become executioners. The Babylonian law of Talion remains while we had the project of building a heavenly Jerusalem here on earth. I believe that this celestial Jerusalem is called death, which I personally call the Great Orient or the Eternal Orient.